Mr. Salmond, thank you for accepting an interview with Agent Breton Press, very small media, Breton.
Très important. Petit, mais très important.
Thank you. My first question is, what are the prospects of Scottish independence today in the perspective of Brexit and crude oil low price?
Well, let's take these things in turn. I mean, the crude oil prices go up and down. I mean, that's interesting enough. There are about 50 countries in the world with significant quantities of oil and gas reserves. Oil prices do go up, they do go down, but of these 50 countries, I don't know a single one who wouldn't rather have it than not have it. So the idea that even at low prices, the oil is a liability is ludicrous. But I dare say that oil prices will recover, and there's certainly plenty of oil and gas reserves around Scotland. Much more important question is the whole concept of Europe. I mean, Scotland has been a European nation for the best part of a millennium, for 1,000 years. I was saying to one of our colleagues at one of the history presentations at this great festival that the first thing that Sir William Wallace, the greatest Scottish hero of all time, Mel Gibson, first thing he did after winning his greatest victory to battle Stirling Bridge in 1297 was he wrote a letter to the Hanseatic League based in Lubeck, basically saying, look, there's been a change, we're back in control, we want our trading concessions back, because the Hanseatic League was the medieval equivalent of the common market.
That's true.
So, the force of Scottish independence has always been deployed in a European context. The interrelationships between Scotland and France, Brittany and Scotland over the centuries have been vast. So, to try and, at this juncture, grasp and wrestle Scotland away from its European roots is a very serious matter indeed. So I would believe that Brexit will bring this issue of Scottish independence to it. Firstly, much more likely, much earlier than I thought.
The Economist has written Brexit has made the Scottish independence more likely.
Yes, much more likely, just because people may well have to take a fundamental choice. Much earlier than we thought. I mean, after 2014, my expectation would have been that the issue of independence would be some years before it came to a choice again. The issue of Brexit means that choice has a defined timescale. In 2 or 3 years' time, when the circumstances of the UK exit become clear, and therefore whether Scotland wants an insurance policy to retain its 1,000-year-long European connection. And if it inspires that the only way to retain that connection is to be independent, then Scotland will become independent.
Right. I read also that 60% of Scotland trade is within the UK. And there is more trade with the UK than with the rest of Europe.
Yes, but then...
So, what will happen? Do you have to negotiate a new...
Yeah, 70% of Canada's trade is with the United States of America.
Yeah, right.
The fact that 70% of Canada's trade is with the United States of America doesn't mean that Canada has to be part of the United States of America.
Of course, yeah.
And of course, the interesting contrast between what the United Kingdom is doing with the single marketplace and any prospective trade arrangement between Scotland and England is this. It's very easy to get a trading arrangement with a single country.
You can have a single market and a trade arrangement.
Yes, indeed. But the difficulty with the UK, of course, is it's very difficult to get a trading relationship with 27 other countries simultaneously, plus the 100 other countries that the single market already has a trading relationship with.
It's more complicated than
so the complications in establishing a trading relationship with a single country. Now, the other thing about the Scottish trade, of course, is that England runs a trade surplus with very few countries. One of those very few countries that runs a trade surplus with is Scotland. And after Europe and the United States of America, Scotland is England's third biggest trading partner.
You have the tough question. I mean, during the last election, the SNP won only 35 seats, and you sent only 35. MPs to Westminster. And in 2012, you had 56 MPs. How do you explain such a setback?
I'm interested in you saying Salmond on site. In 2010, the SNP had 6 MPs. And the 35 is off 59. There are only 59 seats in Scotland. The SNP have 35 of them, which is a majority. Indeed, the SNP is the only party with a majority of the seats it contested. The Labour Party doesn't have a majority of the seats it contested. The Tory Party, who are in government, don't have a majority. But the SNP has, even though we lost seats, has a majority of the Scottish seats. So if in a bad year you win a majority, then it means that a good year you win an even bigger majority.
Is it true that the Labour and Conservative they kind of did a deal to get you out?
An unholy alliance.
Unholy alliance to get you out?
Remember the alliance between Scotland and France was called the Old Alliance. The alliance between Labour and Tory is the unholy alliance. But generally, I mean, you can do various things tactically in politics in order to boost your position, but an unholy alliance is something that's very difficult to sustain over a period of time. So I would expect to be increasing tension in the unholy alliance partners. So look, we must expect in the independence movement that the other parties will combine against us. That is part of the nature of politics. But if your ambition is strong enough, and if your case is strong enough, and if the logic is overwhelming in terms of Scotland's position as a European nation and the way it's to be preserved, then you shall win. And there's no amount of tactical manoeuvring can stop an idea whose time has come.
That's true, Victor Hugo. Since you gave up your responsibility as First Minister and also as a SNP leader, do you regret that since you are not MP anymore, you're not going to London anymore, you don't have any more responsibilities in the movement? So do you regret to having taken this decision of leaving the leadership of the SNP?
No, I think everything has its time in politics, and I had a very good run as SNP leader. I've been in the SNP for 30 years, I've been a parliamentarian for 30 years. I've been the first SNP First Minister of Scotland. I've seen the Scottish Parliament arise, I've seen the Scottish National Party emerge as the dominant force still in Scottish politics. So I think that's a pretty good run, and you must know when it's time to allow the next generation to move forward, and that's the right thing to do. But just not being an elected member of Parliament is unusual for me. But it does offer other possibilities, things you can't do when you're an elected member of Parliament and you can do when you're not. So I'll do some of the things I have not been allowed to do. I'm now
coming to Lorient.
Unleashed, coming to Lorient, yes. I mean, when I was First Minister of Scotland, all I could do was to increase the Scottish presence at this magnificent festival. But I wasn't able in the timetable. We have the Edinburgh Festival on at the same time. I wasn't able to come. But now that I'm no longer have the burden with the responsibilities, I'm now Alex Salmond, liberated.
Coming back to the SNP, people were surprised in Britain, in France, in Europe, that this party was nothing 30 years ago. How do you explain such a successful rise of the Scottish National Party?
Well, I mean, there's a story about Gary Player, the golfer, the South African golfer, who won the Masters at an advanced age in his mid-40s. And in the press conference afterwards, one of the American journalists said, Mr. Player, that was a fabulous last round to win the Masters, amazing, yeah. But you've got to admit, you were a bit lucky. To which Gary Player replied, well, it's a strange thing, the more I practice, the luckier I get. So the SNP came to success because of hard work and practice, 90% perspiration, 10% inspiration. And coming to realise that in terms of a successful political party arising from a national feeling, the political party has to canvass in the field of politics. It has to express a national identity in a political form. It has to give it substance. It has to make it relevant in the modern world. One of the reasons why I think you're correct in your question anticipating a major opportunity for Scottish independence through the European exit of Britain is because it gives an additional immediacy and logic to the idea of an independent Scotland in the modern world. So it's one thing for people to feel part of a nation, it's one thing for people to have a healthy and vigorous cultural expression, but to make a political movement of that, then you have to have a canvas and a point and a purpose and an immediacy in terms of people's day-to-day experience in the modern world. And of course, you have to learn to take on ruthless opponents with common sense and an ability to withstand the slings and arrows of political fortunes.
So what happened just before the referendum? The polls were saying that the yes was going to win, and suddenly the no, the last few days, the no.
In 2014,
the media, what happened?
You must read my book, the French edition, newly published. It explains it in great detail. But what we have to understand is when we started the referendum campaign in 2012, 2 years before the vote, then the support for independence was certainly less than 30%. Indeed, the political attitude survey of 2012, which is not an opinion poll, it's a very comprehensive, deep social research about Scottish attitudes. It put support for Scottish independence in the year 2012 at 23%. In the latest social attitude survey, support is 46%. And what happened is during the course of the campaign, support increased, and just maybe a week or 2 weeks before the campaign, it got from 23% to 50% or 51%. And at that point, of course, the Unionist parties panicked. They joined together, another unholy alliance. They abandoned Prime Minister's questions in the House of Commons. They raced up to Scotland and they made what came to be called the vow, which basically said it was a soft option. It was like hard cop and soft cop. It says, look, you can have all this stuff anyway, without being independent. All the stuff you want, you can have it anyway. Promises. And of course, in a situation where you've just built a majority over a period of time, it is quite easy for people to be gulled into the soft option, the last minute offer. However, of course, the benefit the SNP has is the next time the campaign starts for independence, whether it be a post-Brexit or wherever, then we won't be starting from 23%, we'll be starting from 45%. It's a different world.
How is the media? How was the media, the BBC, for example, during the campaign?
Well, the BBC is a disgrace, and I blame myself for underrating just how biased the BBC was to the Unionist position. And there was a reason for that, because most elections, well, all elections I had fought, although there's an entrenched bias against the SNP and there's an entrenched anti-Scottish bias in my opinion, but a particular bias against the SNP, when you came into the election campaign itself, the television was, generally speaking, in election campaigns fair and square. It was everybody got their allocation of time. And so I assumed, wrongly, mistakenly, in the referendum campaign, that the same thing would happen. That once you got into the actual campaign, then the coverage of the broadcasters would be fair. And to a great extent, the independent station in Scotland was fair. But the BBC was outrageous. And the interesting thing is the BBC, still to this day, don't understand or realise, even although vast numbers of people in Scotland no longer trust the organisation, the greatest broadcasting reputation in the world, traduced because they couldn't bring themselves to cover a referendum on Scottish independence fairly and properly. Indeed, The independence referendum in Scotland is probably the only referendum that the BBC, if for example, just let's imagine that Brittany decided to have a referendum to become independent from France. Yeah, but that's a good or bad thing, leave that to one side. The BBC would cover that referendum fairly, and impeccably fairly, as they would in anywhere in the world. The one place that the BBC couldn't cover a referendum in a proper, fair, distributed, non-biased manner was in Scotland. Why? Because at the end of the day, implicit, even unspoken, even subconsciously, the BBC is a British establishment institution, and therefore a threat to that essence of Britain. It was too much for certain BBC journalists to stomach, and they behaved disgracefully. And the fact that they don't realise it is a sign of their blindness and weakness to that obvious point. Any analysis, any academic analysis, demonstrates the extent of the bias in BBC.
Do you think the Queen, when she took position for the no, had some
I don't think the Queen took a position for the no. I think the press, the Daily Mail, the Telegraph portrayed that position, because I don't think the royal family were engaged in the no campaign. But I think it was in the interests of certain newspapers, the most vicious right-wing newspapers that we have, the Daily Mail, which is a disgrace to journalism, the Daily Telegraph, which is a kind of joke, antiquated paper. To them, of course, it would be very much in their interest to portray the royal family as being against independence, but I don't believe that was the case.
The last question is concerning history and interceltism. Until the Act of Union in 1750, France, until 1750, the Act of Union, France and Scotland were allied against England. There is a long tradition of French landing in Scotland, marriage, and everything you had, intervention, and the strong, the old alliance, you call it. So, any other way, England was a warrant of the independence of the Duchy of Brittany. So, this strategical, historical ties seems to be taking more power than interceltism and the links between Celtic tradition. How do you think we can overcome the traditional historical ties between Scotland and France and Britain and England?
Well, of course, you're quite right. At certain points in history, that during the Wars of Independence, for example, Brittany was allied with the Plantagenets, whereas most of the rest of Europe regarded them as oppressors, including Scotland. But the Old Alliance, of course, was formed in that it was 1295 and lasted for 500 years to 1707. People might argue it lasted longer, because I was just looking at an exhibition of the Battle of Prestonpans during the Jacobite period of 1745, and then, of course, there was help from Brittany for the Jacobites. So things weren't always. History has ebbs and flows and different traditions. It's the case that in French, there was more, incidentally, than just interventions. I mean, the high point of the French-Scottish relationship came in the 16th century when Mary de Guise negotiated a formal union, because the first union that Scotland entered into was not with England in 1707, but was with France, and that was the marital union between Mary Queen of Scots and the Dauphin of France. And indeed, if it wasn't for the historical accident of the unfortunate demise of the Dauphin before the marriage produced offspring, then you would have had an entirely different history, because
French in Scotland.
Well, we did to a great extent, and the garde du corps came from somewhere, did it not? So there's lots of words in Scots. Like when I grew up, I used to talk about gundies, which is a bastardisation of coolie. It was a drain, the flow, water flowing, coolie. the Scots, or traditionally in Scotland, when they flung their rubbish or other things out of high windows in the Grassmarket or the Old Town of Edinburgh or the High Street of Edinburgh, they would shout Gardez Lou, which of course is a derivation of Gardez-vous.
Oh, wow.
Watch out. and if you ever, well, listen, if you're going around the Old Town of Edinburgh and you hear the phrase Gardez Lou, step to one side. Okay. So there are lots of interconnections between Scotland and France, and also at various times, the losing side in the Scottish wars, like the Jacobites in the 18th century, many of them came to France. They came to Scotland with French help, and when they lost, they went back to France.
Yeah.
Many of the great wine families of France had their origins in Scottish refugees. Other times, of course,
there are more ties between Scotland and France than between Scotland and Britain. That's a fact.
Well, it depends on the period of history and who was on which side when. What matters is what happens in future, and that can take place in terms of the cultural ties, the ones we see displayed in this magnificent festival, which is an amazing trans-Celtic experience, which I think many people in Scotland, Wales, Ireland, Britain, Cornwall would do well to attend. Now that I'm no longer First Minister of Scotland, I'm able to embrace these inter-Celtic connections and do so wholeheartedly in the knowledge that history doesn't necessarily repeat itself. What matters is to be on the right side of history, not the wrong one.
Thank you very much.